Okay, so this one is going to be about imbalanced player characters. So once again, for the 40K game, because that's at the forefront of my mind a lot of the time because of the design and because, we're all kind of actively designing stuff for that game. It's in my thoughts a lot. And yesterday I was having a talk with the DM for it, and he's the one that knows a bunch about like both the tabletop and all the old lore and stuff. And funnily, this is a case where Games Workshop's frequent like retconning and changing of lore came up because I was talking about making a character that's like kind of like a not a classic, but like a Beastmaster, not Ranger, but Beastmaster type of character with like a big pet that's like a main part of the character. I brought up using a Space Wolf, and his reaction was immediately like, no, they would never take a wolf, like a Space Wolf would never bring a wolf from Fenris out anywhere. Like, they just don't do that. But within the past however many years it's been since he's like really played, they changed the lore. Yeah, they totally do that now. They have Space Wolves just have cavalry units you can get that are just riding giant wolves. Because, I mean, on one hand, it's cool. That's why they did it. That's why they changed it, because it's cool. But they also had to kind of change the lore. Because at first, any wolf you see on Fenris is supposed to be like failed Space Marine aspirants that like they failed the process to become a full Space Marine. And the unique qualities of the Space Wolf gene seed resulted in them just turning into wolves. So the idea would be, okay, he'd have a wolf, but the wolf would actually be his like not a battle brother, but his like actual brother that he went into the recruiting process with. Both him and his brother passed the initial round, but then once they actually started to become Space Marines, he succeeded in becoming a full Marine, and his brother failed and turned into a wolf instead. So I'd basically be playing these two brothers. One's a Space Marine, the other's a wolf. But it was an idea, but his reaction was, oh no, that's not a thing. So really, that's just some commentary on how they change the lore so often, and it can get really confusing as to sometimes what's canon. And you're looking up information about it, and you find discussions, and these people that you find in comment sections on Reddit, wherever, they're fucking confused too. Man, that's fucking loud. Like, they're confused too. We don't really know half the time what the fuck's going on. Like, for the Carcharodons, we don't know if they're just Raven Guard successors, if they're Chimeric successors, if they're the only remnants of the Second Legion successor. Like, we don't fucking know. And they leave it blank for a lot of reasons, because mystery is exciting and it gets people interested. That's the main reason, but they also just haven't gotten around to it. But anyway, so the main point of all that discussion was playing non-Space Marines in a game, in a group with Space Marines, and how asymmetric it will just kind of be, because an individual Space Marine is just so much more powerful than a regular human or whatever you're playing. Both stat-wise, they get access to better equipment that regular people can't use. Bolt guns, bolt guns, the majority of power weapons, and then the simple fact of them being larger and having larger equipment, it just does more damage. You know, the damage rules of every size category you go up, it increases the damage dice you have. It goes from, at medium you got like 1d8 for a longsword, at large you got 2d8, huge 3d8, gargantuan 40, you know, all that stuff. Which monsters sort of adhere to sometimes, because, you know, you'll find a medium creature that does 4 attacks and its attacks do like 46, like, just because. So, but that's not really what I'm getting at. The idea is that you're just so asymmetric. Why would you ever play a normal person in a group of Space Marines? Well, I know for me, and this is, you know, this is very, like, my perspective. For me, it's, I would play a regular dude because it's interesting to play a regular dude in a group of demigods. And I go into that knowing I'm not going to be the character's not going to be as capable as the rest of the party. And I'm okay with that, and I might design around that in, you know, class choices, race choices, all that kind of stuff. Like, okay, I'm going to try to build for stuff that they either wouldn't do, in some cases can't do, because it's relatively difficult for Space Marines to be stealthy unless you really build into it. You need several pieces of equipment to make up for the fact that they're all in heavy armor, they're all huge. Or you need, like, one of the two, like, stealthier Legion specific backgrounds. So there's some investment there for a Space Marine that, quote, a regular character wouldn't need to do. So there's that. But otherwise, just, you know, they're not going to be as capable. And overall, I'm okay with that because I know that's not the character's role. Whenever I'm building a character, I'm definitely always optimizing. Whatever it is, I'm optimizing because that's just what my brain latches onto. I'm gonna wait a second. This is a little bumpy stretch of road. So anyway, because I know that's not that character's role to be like the big frontliner doing damage or whatever it is. So I'm not going to expect them to fulfill that kind of role. I'm going to build them for something else. Maybe they're just like, you know, maybe they're a noble, like a kind of like an Inquisitor. Like, they've got some good equipment and they can kind of hold their own in a fight, but they're never going to be as capable as a Space Marine. And that's all I need them to do. Hold their own. They can do some damage, they can survive. But what they're really good at is, you know, the political stuff. The knowing a wide variety of things that a Space Marine just wouldn't necessarily be clued into. You know, the inner workings of that particular hive city, that type of thing. Or they're just really good at political persuasion and that kind of thing. That's another angle you can easily go. But again, I'm not like, I'm going to design for whatever the intended purpose of this character is. Like, if I'm going to build a a frontline sword fighter, whether it's in the 40K game or in something else, I'm going to optimize as much as I can for that role. I'm, you know, going to pick certain equipment, certain feats, certain whatevers, and I'm not going to worry about how good he is at persuasion. Some of the most fun I've had is playing a character that is optimized for one really specific thing, and then you get into the situation where it's bad. I was playing a artificer with a negative wisdom score, and I was delighted every time I had to roll a perception check. It was great. Like, just perception. That's a 11 for a total of 9. What do I see? Just, stupid stuff. It's great. Just some of the most fun I've had playing any kind of character. And then, once that character is in his element, he can do a bunch of different things. Box on the road. So, I think there's room for that type of thing. Definitely when I was a newer player and when I understood a little bit less, I definitely would gravitate towards like, oh, the Space Marines have the big stats, I'm going to do that. Well, now not so much. I'm not always looking for the big stats. I'm just looking for what's interesting. But we were also talking about ways we could make them, quote, competitive, because I think that's the angle, or that's the exact word I want to use. They're not competitive. You have to change them change regular characters to make them competitive in some way. Just coming up to a stoplight. So, you got to make them competitive in some way. And there's a lot of ways we could do that. One, and we went through a bunch of different ways. The one we I feel that makes the most sense if you're going to do it, especially it's closest to the tabletop, is instead of just playing a single regular person, you play a small squad that are in the tabletop worth the same or roughly the same amount of points. So instead of playing one Space Marine, you're playing a commissar or a nobleman or an inquisitor or whatever. And he's got a small retinue of soldiers. So you're playing kind of all of those. So you have regular weapons, but you get a few extra attacks. You've got some swarm mechanics maybe, because you're effectively playing a small swarm of dudes. But something along those lines. And depending on your HP, you have more attacks, and every time you do, I guess maybe you do a long rest or you report to a home base or something, you can refill your dudes, or maybe it's just those dudes don't fully die until you hit 0 HP and you roll death saves. That's some minutia to figure out later, but I think that's kind of overall the best approach probably. But a few other ways we thought of was a really minor quick fix kind of way. Give them hero points, extra inspirations, or just some sort of extra resource that they can use to beat the narrative odds as a small guy, as just a little guy. It's my birthday points. So, you can get advantage, you can succeed on rolls, you can reduce damage, you can increase damage, score automatic crits, shit like that, to make up for your lack of stats. Any number of things like that. That's probably not the most elegant solution, but it's probably the quickest. And that requires some fiddling. How many hero points do you give? What exactly do they do? You just give them some stuff and see how it goes. Another way is heavy kind of restructuring of some stuff. It's either peel back what the Space Marines are exactly capable of, class-wise. Maybe the Space Marines don't fully get full classes. And this only really matters for the exact reskin you're doing. The DM has talked about doing a whole rework of the things where, it's a skill-based point system. You select things and skills your character is good at to build a character. that sounds like a lot of work. So in this, you would peel back, the Space Marines, their class is Space Marine. And I've seen a lot of like third-party 5e stuff or Pathfinder stuff or whatever, where, I want to play a dragon. Well, dragon is your class and your race. And you maybe get some little stuff, but something like that could be cool. Or I think, especially because we're already in it now, maybe something like all the races get extra stuff. Tie it to their class. Like, the idea I thought of was like an additional subclass. And that could be something as simple as like, okay, you determine, like, let's say you got 3 types of subclass. You've got, and at least for looking at the reskin we're working with, it's like you've got marshals, you've got tech casters, and you've got psi casters, more or less. Those are kind of like the 3 broad categories you've got. Just have additional subclasses that are mostly based on your race, and have them tied to one of those 3 categories. So like if you're playing an Eldar, but you're playing a Martial Eldar, you get certain specific bonuses and extra abilities. Whereas if you're playing a Psyker Eldar, you get a variety of other abilities that are tied into being a Psyker. And granted, we really only have 2 different, there's several Marshals, and then there's 1 pure Psycaster and 1 pure Tech Caster for the reskin. And then you've got a half caster for both. The Courser is the half Tech Caster, and the Exorcist is the half Psycaster. And they're like Ranger and Paladin, respectively. So, you've got something like that going on. But, so, what would you do there? I don't know, maybe choose whether you want the Marshal or the Tech Caster subclass if you're one of those half casters. I guess that'll probably work. So that's maybe not the most elegant solution, and it's more work, and you're still designing a whole bunch of extra stuff. But I don't know, maybe that could be a simpler solution where, if you're a human, like if you're just a human fighter, like you're a Catachan jungle fighter, your quote racial subclass can be stuff relating to, just being a regular human. You can blend into environments a little bit better because you're smaller. You've got that like human knack to do stuff. Like, in a lot of systems you see humans get to just like roll extra bonuses on stuff. Something humans can do, like you can just roll what is basically a luck die, and it improves as you level up. It starts at a D4 and it scales all the way up to a D12. Every time your proficiency bonus goes up, the size of this die goes up, and maybe you get proficiency number of them per day, or per day, per short rest, who knows. And you just add them to stuff. You just roll it and add it. You can add it to attack rolls, you can add it to damage, you can add it to saves, and that just represents kind of the idea of the indomitable human spirit and their ability to adapt and get used to whatever. Something like that could make enough sense. And that would also be more work to design those things. But is it going to be more work to design some additional, what are effectively subclasses and extra racial features? Or would it be more work to redesign the whole system? What would be the better payoff in the end? Like, while it might be more work to redesign the whole system, theoretically that's going to be better, assuming we do a good job. Like, we might fuck it up, I don't know. And something the DM brought up was like, racial abilities aren't supposed to be that powerful. Well, the Space Marines are all racial abilities, and they're that powerful. So, I don't know if that fully applies anymore. And then even if it does apply, that's old design. Do something a little different. But those are some thoughts I had on all that. That's all I got for you today.